Hey, welcome in. It's the morning after Nebraska's 21-17 loss to USC. Brian's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed over there after a extra hour of sleep last night. So let's just get into it. I guess we've had a few hours to kind of digest things. Brian, where do you kind of go with that game? Where should we even start? There's kind of a lot to tackle here, but just kind of the feeling that Nebraska again let one through its fingers when they could have had a nice win there.
Definitely that. It's a game with layers to it because Nebraska had its own missed opportunities. I think some questionable decisions we can get into. And then there's the part with the injuries that are just unfortunate, where you would have liked to have seen that game play out for 60 minutes with Dylan and Elijah Pritchett out there and seen what happened. Like I'll start with this. Like if you had told me beforehand Nebraska was going to hold USC to 21 points, and Maeva was going to only throw for 135 yards. Would he complete 9 passes, Bruntz? 9 of 25? Is that what he was? Something like
9 of
that.
23 for 135 and a pick.
Yeah. I mean, I would have said, all right, you take that every day of the week and you like Nebraska to win that game. And so I know we can get into the defense and the struggles against the run and how Maeva got him with the zone read, and they had 202 yards rushing. You can't take that off the board. But all in all, it's just a game where you knew going in Nebraska's offense was going to have to make a couple dynamic plays and, score in the high 20s probably to win. And it was set up for him to do so. And even with the backup quarterback, it's just disappointing when you have some of the drives that sort of flailed. And let's talk about the 4th and 1. Let's go there right off the bat, because you told me off the air, like thinking about it more this morning. That's you would be in the camp that's like you go there, right? Go for it.
Yeah, I mean it's part of I think the bigger conversation about the decision making sometimes, because we've seen earlier in the season where closer in Nebraska's been a little bit more aggressive with trying to score touchdowns and not just taking the points. And in hindsight, I think that Kyle Cunanan has the leg to make that field goal, and I think if it was just a little bit to the left, he probably does. I think it hit the right upright, but I probably sneaks just over. But in that situation with those weather conditions, I mean, 52 yards, that's a tall ask, I think, even if it is, in your range. And I don't know that 52 yards is just taking the points in
Yeah,
that
right.
situation. Like, I mean, when you put it that way, it's kind of like, okay, that doesn't compute. So I was a little surprised they didn't go for it, given the situation, given the fact that it felt like, I think for most of the night, Nebraska was able to get done what it needed to on the ground against USC. So I think kind of all of that, I was a little surprised that they didn't just kind of press the issue a little bit, especially at home with, maybe you capture the momentum a little bit. And Nebraska's defense, for as many rushing yards as it was giving up at that point, felt like it was still, going to be able to stand in there and trade punches with USC's offense.
Mm-hmm. That was a rough series because not only was opportunity missed, but they used 2 timeouts while doing
Yeah.
so. They had the timeout to start the drive where, I think there were some extracurriculars before that first timeout, if I remember right. Some guys were kind of mixing it up, and Rule was hot about something, maybe that on the sideline. I don't know if they didn't reset it or what the deal was, but Nebraska didn't break the huddle until like 7 on the play clock on that one. That
Right.
was right when Latif had gotten going too. So there was some understanding there where you're going to have some hiccups, I guess, with the young guy. But what added to the disappointment was on that series, Latif had a nice little scramble. They were on the 37 and it was 2nd and 4. And you're like, okay, they've got a good down and distance here. It's not going to come to this 4th and 1, but they ended up having 2 kind of clunky plays. and then they acted like they're going to go for it. And Rule said they were looking for a cadence to draw them off sides in the post game, but then you use another timeout, which obviously would be useful on the final drive, like they had to do at the end. So there was a lot of things in that drive that were just frustrating. And I felt like when the kick missed, not only because Nebraska didn't score, but because they used 2 timeouts, because it felt like they kind of bungled it, USC was just uplifted so much from that. Like, that was such a big sequence in the game.
Yeah, because you go back to that sequence. You had the 2 timeouts that you mentioned. You missed the field goal. That same drive, that was the one where Pritchett left early in that drive.
Yeah.
So you're kind of scrambling a little bit there, and you turn around and on the ensuing USC drive, because I think you're right. I mean, it did kind of give some juice to the opposing sidelines. It felt like the way that USC was calling plays and the things that they did differently on that drive, that they definitely smelled blood a little bit after the way that one kind of looked and transpired. And you get a 5-yard run, you take a shot and don't get it. Then Maava throws a nice ball for 29 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's 2 quarterback keepers, and you're in the end zone. And, I talking to Nebraska's players after that game, the defensive players especially, I don't think they really regarded Maava as a really big threat to run the ball, but he kind of has like a effective running ability. I mean, he was a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of quickness, a little bit of shiftiness, and Nebraska, I think, was really playing hard to stop the running back on those read plays, and USC took advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, you go from basically having a chance to maybe put the game away or at least take a lot of wind out of their sails with that drive on offense, and then all of a sudden you're in a tie game after USC scores and gets the 2-point conversion. It just that sequence felt like more than any, even with the injury and having Latif in there, that was where it kind of slipped through your fingers a little bit. And that's when that was when the like, oh, here we go again starts to creep in.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it from like if Nebraska were in USC shoes and like the Husker fan base and Husker Twitter's sort of reaction in real time. Like if you're behind 14-6 and the other team has 2 possessions, basically, the one with the Raiola fumble where he gets injured, very unfortunate, but you had the ball at their 23-yard line. So USC dodges that bullet, and then they dodge another one. And it felt like if Nebraska, and maybe this is where I guess Rules like, I don't want to play with fire. I think the guy can make the kick. I just got to get to 17 and get this to 2 scores. But I'm with you. I would have went for that 4th and 1, tried to get that thing at least closer for a kick. Obviously, there's no guarantee you're going to pick it up. But I always ask myself this when watching a game: do I feel like the percentage is higher that the kids that the kicker's actually going to make this thing than picking it up? And I wouldn't say I would on that one. I felt like a 4th and 1 probably is a higher percentage. I think most of the charts would say that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the card says on that one, but
you don't have your card with you.
No, I don't. And I do wonder. So I mean, you had, you have a backup quarterback in there for the first time against Big Ten play. And, what is the, what options did you have play call wise at your disposal to kind of pick that up? Because I think, as much as you want to say the management was an issue, and it was, I mean, the reality is you lose a quarterback that's kind of the central part of your team in the third quarter. And it felt like it really took Nebraska a while to adjust to whatever that means, because I don't know that TJ Latif was able to run a lot of what Nebraska wanted to do in that game.
Yeah, they were handcuffed after the Raiola thing big time. And Latif, I think, and he said it was a tough spot to be in. He's played 2 college football games prior to this, and he looked very good. It was against Akron and Houston Christian. This is a whole different animal. And there's a couple things where I think his early nerves showed. And I do think with like a full week of preparation, like we'll see what the situation is next week, but I think he can probably play a little bit better than he did. But yeah, it didn't feel like there was a lot they could go to, and maybe that affected why you don't go for the 4th and 1, I guess, is you feel like you're limited. You feel like they know what you're going to do. Nonetheless, I would have done it. But another play I want to talk about Bruntz is, because I was looking at it this morning, was the fumbled snap Latif had when it was 14-14. Because I was kind of critical in the moment on social media. This was right after Emmett Johnson ripped off the 23-yard run.
Mm-hmm.
So they're on the USC 21, and Emmett is just like getting stuff that's positive done, like every time he touches it somehow. Like he's squeezing out yards, even when it doesn't look like it's there. And so I felt like at this moment, especially with the young quarterback, it's like, I know he's approaching 30 carries, but if you got to give it to him 35 to 38 times tonight, you just might have to do that. And they were going to pass it, and then Latif fumbled it, and so it was really bad optics. Now I watched the play back, and the play would have worked. The call was set up to work well. Like, it was not going to be a swing pass to Emmett. He was going to come back and throw it to Ja'Cory Barney on an inside screen, and they had the block set up, and Rule mentioned this in the post game. So that's just an unfortunate deal. But again, that's a situation where you have a young QB, and I'm sure he's thinking ahead of what he's going to do, like before he gets the ball. And you had one of those moments, and it hurt to only get 3 on that one.
Were you still surprised though that they didn't go more to Emmett down the stretch? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
that the play call was there. You're absolutely right. But I mean, it felt like a game where you probably could not have, like, given everything, like having your backup quarterback in there, you basically have to shift sides that your tackles are playing on midway in the third quarter. You've got a guy that's probably a guard in there playing tackle, your third string guy. And, I don't know that you could have given Emmett Johnson the ball enough last night.
Yeah. Well, we said it right after, and I wouldn't back away from this. If you said you have to bet on Emmett Johnson to get you 10 yards somehow with 3 touches in a row, it just feels like he's on this heater right now where he can get it done. Like, I mean, he is making some runs where it's not always well blocked, but he squeezes through, he bounces around, he gets 5-6 yards. Like, all game he was doing that. And so I did think in the moment, even though that play call was there, as I said, it sort of seemed like see if this guy can just carry it to the paint now that you're on the 20-yard line. I know it's not going to be easy, but it felt like more reliable than anything else Nebraska had going. Obviously, they weren't a big threat. I think Latif can throw it, and in the future, he's going to show that he can. But on this particular night, it was tough circumstances. And what was his stat line? 5 of 7 for 7 yards. So I mean, it was all like just a little putt-putt type plays that just didn't garner a lot.
Because Emmett was doing work against a pretty loaded box. Because I don't know how much USC really respected Nebraska's wide receivers' ability to win one-on-ones. Like, it felt like they were content to kind of just let those guys be out there on an island against them. And he was really making things, as he's done all year, and especially in Big Ten play. I mean, he's really kind of made things happen himself. But I don't know, that sequence with it just felt like you got into USC territory, and you needed to just kind of ride him a little bit more. And oddly enough, when Nebraska needed to really move late in the game, I mean, they were still handing it to Emmett, which, I mean, it just felt like. It just never felt like after Dylan left the game that Nebraska's offense got into much of any kind of flow there.
Yeah. I mean, like a minute and a half it went off on that drive. And even if you get the first down, you're still at your own like 30-yard line.
Right.
With one timeout. So it was very unlikely. I think he would have picked up the first down had their feet not got tangled. It looked like he had a hole to cut through. But okay, Bruntz, on the defensive side, the first half, I thought the formula was perfect, and especially on defense, like they were giving up the rushing yards, especially on that one series. They're just getting gashed. And then Lincoln Riley's like, here you go. Here's a little gift. They get down to the 7-yard line, and he tries to throw it, every play, and worked to Nebraska's advantage. And the crowd helps with the false start. You hold them to a field goal there. That felt like a big win early in the game for Nebraska. And that whole first half that was a summary of it. Like it kind of played out perfectly for the Huskers.
Yeah, I mean, going before the game, we talked about, Nebraska needs to keep this a low possession game.
Mm-hmm.
You need one of those drives that just absolutely milks the clock. You get some points out of it, make a statement. That first drive was exactly what Nebraska needed offensively in that game, especially after USC took the ball. And I agree. I thought that Lincoln Riley and some of the play calling that they did in that first half kind of let Nebraska off the hook a little bit. Like there were some moments in that first half where it was kind of like, I'm going to do what I want to do, and I don't care. I don't care what's working. This is what we're calling. We're going to throw the ball. Yeah. And I think Nebraska, you got to give credit to the defensive backs in that game. I mean, Andrew Marshall and Donovan Jones played the entire game. They had to deal with a legitimate All-American candidate, Mekhi Lemon, for USC, and he had 2 catches for 18 yards in that game. Yeah. He was targeted 4 times, and I think he had a 16-yarder and he had a 2-yarder, and that was it. And I think Nebraska was kind of going out of its way to make sure that USC wasn't going to beat him over the top. And, until those last couple drives, they were pretty successful in doing that. And, I thought, especially early in that game, they were kind of riding the crowd a little bit. They were making big plays. The Vincent Shavers blitz right up the A gap was kind of the big play that they needed, I think, to kind of get off the field and keep the crowd in it. But I think, again, like you said in the start, if you said you're going to hold USC to 21 points, Mayawa's not going to throw a touchdown. You're going to hold them like 200 yards under what they average in total offense on the season per game. I would have had a hard time believing that Nebraska didn't somehow walk out with a win in that game.
Yeah, even if you told me they ran for 202 and you attached it with the 135 passing, if you said that to me Friday night, then like, all right, I'll sign that document. I think Nebraska could win with that. And I hadn't even looked that closely at Lemon's numbers. I knew it was low, but yeah, I mean, we talked about him all week, like a first-team All-American type guy. Andrew Marshall was really good. Like that pick he had, I mean, that's studying a QB, and that's planning put on display right there. He got beat on the 1, but it was a nice ball on the 29-yarder in the third quarter. I just thought the DBs overall played pretty well, and I'm just not going to bang the defense all that much for holding them to 21 points. I mean, I knew going in USC was going to have something that they would find that worked for them. They've got, I mean, Lincoln Riley, whatever you say about how he called it last night, and I agree with you, he's one of the better play callers in this game in the last decade. You know that they're going to at times counterpunch you and have their moments. It's just unfortunate those moments seem to come at the very end in the final surge. And he had a couple trick plays up his sleeve that worked. He had that 2-point conversion, which I think was a big play for both teams' headspaces, Bruntz, after USC scored. And if Nebraska could have stopped them on the 2, you're still got a lead late third quarter, and you're kind of hanging on to that. And when it was tied, and then you were considering Nebraska's quarterback situation, it was like if you're at Wimbledon, it was like advantage Trojans, even though it didn't say that on the scoreboard.
Yeah, the flea flicker was a good play call. It was a nice throw.
It was.
It was well placed. I mean, I think the coverage was probably even a little bit better on that than maybe what USC was expecting. But I thought the throw was really what made that play. Like it was right where it needed to be. Mm-hmm. And he did that a couple times in that second half, like where you just had to have a play. he was able to make a nice throw. And then, of course, the runs too. I mean, those were two pretty gritty runs on that scoring drive to get it back to 14 all.
Yeah, you call that delayed flea flicker is basically what it was. And you're expecting that you completely have the other side bamboozled, and it's going to be one of those where you could throw it way behind the guy. He could sit there like a PG-13 movie and wait for it and then turn around and score. Guthrie was right with them. So Nebraska actually didn't buy it as much as you would think. That one hurt. I mean, that play, it was like 2nd and 10 too. So if you had gotten away with an incompletion there and it hadn't paid off for them in a play, I'm sure they thought all week, hey, we're going to go to this at some point, and we got them. That would have been a big deal in that game. So there were just a couple moments like that where Maeva made the play. That one in the 3rd and 5 we mentioned earlier against Marshall, who had a really good game, but that was just the one he gave up. So I don't know where else you want to take it, Bruntz. It's one of those games where you're like, the crowd was so juiced. They weren't Nebraska nice. They were booing USC for fair catching kickoffs. Like, I like the vigor the fan base had and how they bought into the whole blackout thing. I hope they do it every year. I think it was cool. It's just disappointing how another chance in a setting like that was escaped your grasp.
Do you, like, with the run defense, that was the 3rd game this year that Nebraska's given up over 200 on the ground. Cincinnati, they were just over 200. Michigan obviously was the big one. Kind of down the stretch here, I mean, is there anything Nebraska can do in your mind to turn the tables there, or is it just who they are? Like, because we're kind of at that point in the season where you know who the guys are. Nebraska rotated a little bit more again along the defensive line. Kind of a mix of 3- and 4-man fronts last night. But, I mean, you're facing a Penn State team that's, later in the month will want to run the ball if they can. Iowa certainly, I'm sure, has been watching every Nebraska tape with, kind of doing this just because they're willing to stand in there and pound the ball. So, is there anything that can be done, or is this just the 2025 Nebraska football team that you have to find a way to get around that somehow?
I lean towards the latter. I mean, you're 9 games in, got quite a few data points. I think there's things that John Butler's defense is really good at taking away, obviously in the pass game, but there's definitely some leaks there, and I don't know. I don't know that it's just scheme either. I just don't know if they quite have the personnel yet to handle some of it. Like we knew all along, like all offseason is like this defensive line, you're going to have growing pains with them. But, even the linebackers, you've got some guys, who I think there's been some really good moments there. And then there's been some inconsistencies too. So it's a group who I think we kind of know what they are. And the unfortunate part is it's all on tape, and all 3 of these teams have capabilities left in November to expose them too. That's the worrisome part. I think as you go out to Los Angeles next week.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've seen growth in guys like Williams Nwaneri. I mean,
definitely.
He kind of went from like a guy, he's going to work his way in, and I mean, he's essentially your starting defensive end now. Beyond that, you just couldn't. I don't think yet you've seen the growth from a lot of those guys that you kind of needed to for that defensive line to take the next step. And you added a couple guys out of the portal that so far have not. Certainly Nwaneri has, but I mean, Jalen George, Gabe Moore, neither of those guys have really stood up and been counted yet this year. So, I mean, you kind of know who you are, I think, at this point, unfortunately. And I think you're going to have to find a way to get around that somehow in November, schematically or give those guys a little bit more help.
Yeah, I mean, even in like our best laid visions of what it could be, you would kind of think, at least I would think that phrase, like, I hope they can keep the group together, and like the 26 group of this D line could be really interesting and really good. But what's that going to look like in 25? Are they able to actually go in warp speed and be like the 26 versions of themselves like a year ahead of schedule. That's very tough to do for guys who had such limited snaps. And so I honestly think we're seeing about like what you would project would happen. It's like there's not a surprise at all with that. And I agree with you on Nwaneri. He's a guy who's got that ceiling is as high as everybody thought. I think it's just, he just needs some more time to keep going like the other guys. So Keona Davis, all those type of players. But I guess as they go into this next week, the big question now, Bruntz, is what's Raiola's status? What's Elijah Pritchett's status? Where's this team's mind at if they're like, if you are down your QB1, like going on a road game after a really, gut punch loss, like what are you thinking about all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the quarterback question is going to be a big one. I mean, you kind of have two things you have to do. I mean, you've got to see how far along you can get Dylan back from the injury. It seemed like it was, at least where he was grabbing as he was walking off the field, it seemed like it was like a high ankle type situation, maybe from my very amateur Holiday Inn doctorate that I have, Holiday Inn Express. I'm eager to see what Latif looks like with a full week of preparation. I mean, I think people have to understand that, you got to get your backup ready, but when you're in the course of a season, it's hard to get that guy a ton of reps and in the game plan and truly ready. I mean, I know that elsewhere in the country, guys have stepped in and done that, but it's a true freshman that's going to make some mistakes. I think Nebraska's offense looks different with him in there, as it should, just given his skill set and maybe how that's different from what Dylan does well. And that might be, I mean, in some ways, a little bit of an advantage for Nebraska because you've got UCLA over there having to prepare for two very, very different looks at quarterback, depending on how things go. But that's going to be the story of the week. We'll see where Pritchett's at. I mean, that's also not to be overlooked because Gunnar Gatula was out for that game. You had Turner Corcoran playing right tackle, then he moved over with Knack at right. Knack came in there after Pritchett went down. And I mean, beyond that, I mean, I don't even know what your backup tackle depth looks like behind those guys right now. So, I mean, that's scary thin at a position that was already kind of struggling a little bit with consistency, to put it mildly. And, it's an important week for this program because I don't know about you, but the guys that were coming through for post-game interviews on the side in the hallway last night, it felt like there was a little bit of a gut punch aspect to that game, more so than there was against Michigan. I felt like that was a little bit more of a more difficult loss to stomach. And I don't know if that was just Dylan's situation kind of, hanging over everything, which I think it does, but it feels like it's going to be a little bit more of a heavy lift for guys to kind of move on and lift themselves off the mat this week.
I think it was a layered loss. It was the Dylan aspect, and it's also, against Michigan, it felt like Nebraska was kind of trying to hang in. They were always, they had like the Hail Mary touchdown and stuff that kind of brought them back, and they would all, but Michigan was always kind of playing from ahead. And this one, you're up 14-6. You've got the ball where you do, two times, like driving to go up 2 scores. I think guys could just taste it. Like you could see like what this could be, the kind of night it could be in Lincoln, and what it would mean. And then to just like have it disappear, I think just added some things that explain why guys were like they were in the post game. They were up front too. I mean, you feel bad for Sierra Wright. You know how badly he wanted this game. He's obviously been a great Husker and a great leader. And he was just torn up about it. But, football doesn't allow you to feel sorry for yourself because the other side's not going to. And, UCLA is going to be fired up to play Nebraska next week. They're going to see that as a winnable game for them. And we went into this month, Bruntz, with the idea like, hey, could something really exciting could happen? There's also that like worst case scenario, like 6-6 has never been off the table, I think, in people's minds. So you got to like be that team that's going to punch back now and show, no, we're at least somewhere in the middle of that.
Yeah, UCLA is coming off of a bye. Going into the bye, they got absolutely waxed by Indiana. So I'm guessing there's a little bit of motivation on their part, probably to come back strong in that one against Nebraska. That is going to have to find some answers in practice this week. I mean, that's a tough place to be. But I mean, it's again, it's probably going to be a close game. It seems like they all are, but Nebraska. It felt like Nebraska. I think the tough part about that loss is it had felt like Nebraska was doing things that were eliminating the mistakes that led to those kinds of losses. And it felt a little bit like a step back into some of the sins of the past in that one. And I know the injuries played a role, and those cannot be discounted, but it just felt at times like, okay, that you needed somebody to step up and make a play, and it was USC that made them all down the stretch.
Yep. Well, 6-3 they sit. UCLA, it was 8 p.m. Central. That's when we're kicking it off out there at the Rose Bowl.
Yeah. Put the coffee on. It's gonna be a late one.
There should be a strong Husker contingent because people stadium bucket list and all. I'm sure there's a lot of people have signed on for this one for a while. So while morale is down, they should get a lift from, I would think, I don't think there's going to be a ton of UCLA fans. So Nebraska can turn that into like a neutral site, like high school gym type of game.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of it will depend on how many seats UCLA is willing to untarp at the Rose Bowl, probably, to allow more Nebraska fans in there. Anything else? Should we get out of here? What?
Yeah, we should get out of here, I think.
Okay.
Go on with our Sunday morning. We had limited sleep, like probably a lot of Husker fans, but we did get that extra hour, which I was thankful for. So that was good.
Nice. All right. Well, we'll have plenty on Husker247 from last night's game leading up to UCLA. I'm sure injury updates all week. Big recruiting weekend as well. There were a ton of recruits on the sidelines before last night's game. Great atmosphere, like you said. I mean, I think that was I thought Nebraska did a really nice job with that. But we'll have plenty of coverage throughout the day and throughout the week at Husker247. So make sure and get there. We'll be back with Husker247 Daily, the Husker247 Podcast, and the Hypecast later in the week.